On Giants. Mounds, Monsters, Myth and Man, or Why We Want to Be Small, by Brad+Lockwood.
Copyright 2010, Brad Lockwood, all rights reserved.
Quotes, Doc, unquotes, Cheney.
Cattaraugus County was sparsely settled prior to the War of 1812, forcibly abandoned during, then gradually resettled afterward. And the book in which I first encountered giants, L.H. Everett's History of Cattaraugus Co., New York, was written some 6 decades later. However virgin the territory, and not counting the Seneca, who have been strategically then forcibly relocated enough, and at last settled on the Allegheny and Cattaraugus reservations, and others in Oklahoma, tens of thousands of immigrants had already passed through the region, bringing and taking tokens and tales with them. The French and Indian War, Erie Canal opening, homesteading, uprooted families, forests, and fields. Back then, if you couldn't afford the fare from Buffalo over the Great Lakes and beyond, you walked southwest through Cattaraugus County. And those who couldn't build a boat fast enough to follow the Allegheny were often snowed in. Itinerant migrants became the unintended settlers, founders of my county. My family was among them, lumberjacks who proved all too capable. Within hardly 60 years, the entire region was scalped. Old growth, trees 8-foot plus diameter, bore the same fate as the ancient forts and mounds, eroding and forgotten. Forest formations and man-made earthworks had no defense from eager settlers and oxen, axes and plows. It is telling that my great-great-great-grandfather Job Case, a woodsman of repute, went from clearing an acre a month to nearly 50 per year in less than two decades. Pictures of the county circa 1880 show landscapes of stumps, not a tree or deer in sight. Still, agrarians, not woodsmen, easily did the most damage to ancient earthworks. Almost all of the early accounts come from frustrated farmers who uprooted an old tree or stump atop a knoll on their land, accidentally exposing the interior of a mound and its immense inhabitants. This was no small discovery, so more of the farmers' time was wasted. Local amateur archaeologists, known as antiquarians until the professional field of archaeology was developed into a science in the very late 1800s, inspected, postulated, papers spread the news, and speculators invested. Once looted, the land was either sold or sown, the mound raised, and farmer back at work on his leveled fields. By the publication of L.H. Everett's History of Cattaraugus Co., New York in 1879, it was already too late. So much had been lost in such little time. Others seemed to sense this. Oral accounts, overheard or passed down, second generation by then, were put on paper for the first time, and earlier reports reprinted, including the work of, quote, Doc, end quote, Cheney, mentioned in the earlier quote from Everett's as, quote, Mr. Cheney, end quote. The son of some of the first settlers of Conewango, Theseus Apoleon+Cheney was the son of a minister of the Reformed Methodist Church, who then became a Wesleyan and retired a church elder. Born around 1823, T. Apoleon+Cheney was self-taught, reading any book that crossed his path, but with the Bible ever his basis. Home, at best, single-room schooled. Cheney also suffered from seizures, a condition not yet understood, falling to the ground and flailing, with many people thinking he was possessed. Records at Oberlin College in Pennsylvania show a T. Cheney attending the pre-college, finishing her high school program for a single year but never continuing on for a degree. Still, like many literate Americans of the era, Cheney was captivated by recent discoveries in the jungles of South America. Mayan, Aztec, or Incan, bizarre temples stumbled upon with impossible engravings, too akin to the pyramids of Egypt, documented during Napoleon's campaign. European, too. Stonehenge is Hebrew. Druid mystics. Cheney exhibited an earnest intelligence by his late teens, a self-trained civil engineer, and already an active antiquarian in his early 20s. He wrote every living president and prominent American asking for an autograph, from which he assembled one of the most comprehensive collections in the United States. Only 2 presidents, presumably Washington and John Adams, were not acquired. nor was Herman Melville's autograph. He wasn't available either, due to another sea voyage by the author of Moby Dick. Scattered and sadly a fraction of the total, this collection of autographs is now in private hands, accepted to settle a debt decades ago and subsequently sold off. In addition to collecting politicians' autographs, Cheney was also involved and all too eager to make a name for himself. Of broad interests, religion, abolition, early civilizations, and outspoken, Cheney, other than Giants, is notable as the man who, quote, also suggested the name Republican for the new party in 1854 in a speech in Conowongo, New York, end quote.
Footnote.
Mention of Apoleon+Cheney's speech in 1854 in Conowongo is given atop a letter from writer William Gilmore Simms, dated January 14, 1868. The original of which is located in the Berg collection at the New York Public Library. The exact date of Cheney's speech using the word Republican is not given, but probably between early June and July 6, 1854. The party of Lincoln was founded after much public debate on the latter date, while Horace Greeley, editor of the New York Tribune, suggested the name Republican in articles throughout June of 1854. It is suspected that Cheney's voracious reading probably led him to Greeley's usage, and thus his own, in Conowongo.
Frederick+Larkin, M.D., was Cheney's opposite. The son of a respected surgeon and born in Connecticut, Frederick+Larkin was Cheney's senior by 9 years and formally educated, following his father's footsteps but briefly abandoning medicine to pursue a career as a watchmaker. Arriving in Western New York by 1841, leaving home but returning to his father's field, Larkin accepted the position of professor of physiology at the Randolph Eclectic Medical College, receiving his honorary M.D., in surgery most likely. Though opposites, Cheney the self-learned local and Larkin M.D. the newly arrived surgeon and professor, their union was the subject of antiquity. Surrounded by forts and mounds, remnants of an age long lost, the two were sure to enlist the aid of the Seneca, however biased.
It is admitted by all of the intelligent Iroquois with whom I have conversed that the people who constructed the mounds were an unknown people, and that tradition interposes no beams of light to extricate them from the confusion which has been wrought by time.
Explained Larkin M.D. in 1880, eloquent as ever, adding with authority, quote,
They say their fathers desired them to remain undisturbed.
It must be further noted that such accounts were usually prefaced as being from, quote, intelligent, end quote, or, quote, elder, end quote, Indians, while others are far less respectful nor eloquent. Me know nothing about them. They were here before the red man, was the answer, quote, an aged Indian, end quote, in the Dakotas, supposedly gave to questions about an interesting graveyard, also purportedly containing giant skeletons, near Mandan, as reported in the local newspaper, The Pioneer.
Footnote.
Note, I have yet to find or further study this paper or actual article. Citations on websites simply don't count, and caveats are important. Early newspapers demand vetting akin to today's websites. Gold nuggets were to be found in any shallow stream. Early publications reek of propaganda, profits, politics, personal and regional interests entwined. All sources of early or even contemporary history are subjective.
Apoleon+Cheney and Frederick+Larkin, M.D. were a new breed, antiquarians and intellectuals. Cheney would write several books on multiple counties and regions in New York State, Cattaraugus, Chemung, and Seneca Lake, including folklore, history, forts and mounds, finds, as well as theories on their makers, races, capabilities, and connections with others, Aztecs, Egyptians, Druids, et al. Conversely, Larkin M.D. would publish only one book, interestingly not until after Cheney's death, titled Ancient Man in America. The more meticulous, a watchmaker at heart, exacting and pensive Larkin M.D., paired with the younger, more eager T. Apoleon+Cheney,